Hey everybody, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to Beekeeping for Newbies. Thank you so very, very much for taking the time to listen. I do appreciate you. And as always, feel free to jump into our Discord room. There's a link off of the Beekeeping for Newbies, NEWBEES.com homepage. You're probably noticing I've shifted from doing my email address to the Discord room because there's about 2.6 million emails coming in every day, and I'm doing my best to keep up with everybody. But obviously I have to kind of stack, rank, order, align. I have to put them in order, obviously based on the people who are paying for some of those memberships and things. So it's a little bit of a tough thing to balance, and I want to be as responsive as I possibly can. So the Discord room is probably a faster way to get answers from the community here, but feel free to always drop me an email, Jeff at beekeepingfornewbies.com. It's NEWBEES.com. Don't forget, we do have the YouTube channel up. It's just youtube.com/@beekeepingfornewbies. We have the Beekeeping for Newbies homepage, which has all the nuke plans, swarm trap plans, some Varroa information on there. There's some American foul brood docs that we have posted on there, just some kind of general info. And then bestbeekeepinggear.com. That's where we've got info on Varroa mite treatment methods. We have a quick write-ups in there about like oxalic acid, the dribble method, the vaporization, the pads, and that we're going to do some more detailed write-ups on Apivar, Formic Pro, and some other things. But lots of resources. And again, that's bestbeekeepinggear.com. Today's warm-up song is brought to you by Semisonic from 1998. The song is Singing in My Sleep, and it was released on the anniversary date of my enlistment into the U.S. Army, the sweetest smelling army in the world. Okay, I do want to start by a quick comment. This is kind of a go back from a long time ago. I've commented many times. You've seen it in videos, in podcast episodes. I've said wet bees are dead bees. Now, what I'm referring to when I say this is very specifically when you have bees inside the hive and they get excessively wet, from condensation dripping down on them, making them wet, that makes them substantially more likely to die because of being wet. They're not going to be able to regulate their temperature once they're wet, and it's kind of all over for them. The reason I'm bringing this up is I think someone had commented the other day, and it's 100% on me, right? I don't think I articulated that well enough. But they were talking about bees being out in the rain or maybe doing an install and having the hive open, and they didn't want the bees to get wet because wet bees are dead bees. If you're doing a quick install, like you get a nuke and you want to get that nuke from the nuke box into your 8 or 10 frame Langstroth or whatever you're using, a couple of drops of rain on the bees is not going to hurt them at all. Bees get caught out in storms sometimes. They land on a tree or a flower or hide somewhere, wait for things to kind of pass by, and then they fly home. So I just want to make sure I cleared that up. I don't want anybody thinking that their bees are going to die every time it rains. Okay, what I want to talk about today is something that's pretty important, and for a lot of people it might already be here, the further kind of south that you might be in the U.S., it's something that happens in a lot of places, doesn't necessarily happen everywhere. But what happens is we have this amazing period of the spring nectar flow. We have everything in the world, all the trees and the flowers and plants, everything is in bloom. There is just forage abundance everywhere. The bees just go nonstop. It's an exciting time. It's really, really cool watching all of the activity. And this is where all the cool but yet challenging things are happening, where you have like massive growth. If you want to do queen rearing, this is the time because you have so many resources coming in. If you want to do splits, this is the time because that's the time they're naturally swarming and they're naturally splitting anyway. You can make mistakes. You can be like, oh man, I probably shouldn't have made 4 hives from this one single colony. And you can still get out of it, right? Because there's so much abundant resources available. But all good things must come to an end. Now, where I am this year, it's May 24th right now. This was actually my granddad's birthday. It just dawned on me. But anyway, today is the 24th. And typically for me, around the first week of June, we go into what we call a dearth. So the dearth is just, a period of a void. And so it's not just something that would apply in beekeeping. It's just you have abundance and you have dearth, right? There's just nothing basically. So when you hear someone say, oh yeah, we're in a dearth, they're saying that there's no nectar or pollen resources available anymore. Now, typically for me, that's usually around the first week of June. I remember last year, it was kind of like mid to late June. We still had pollen. I remember seeing pollen coming in, into the hives, and we still had good brood rearing taking place, but that will come to an end. Now, the colony is really, really good at understanding and recognizing the amount of resources coming in, and then gauging their behavior inside the colony outside of that, or I should say in conjunction with that. When the foragers are coming back and they're like, yeah, we don't have as much nectar, or we don't have as much pollen, or whatever resources they're trying to find that they can't, this is all communicated with the other bees within the hive. So if the nurse bees are like, hey, we need pollen to feed this brood, and they're like, well, we don't have any, then the nurse bees are like, all right, it's time to shut down brood production. We don't have pollen. We don't have what we need. Now, sometimes you may have a lot of pollen inside the hive, but they just don't have sufficient nectar resources. They don't want to tap into their stored honey. That's what's supposed to get them through the winter. Now, see, they could absolutely break into that honey and use that honey as the carbohydrate source to mix with their protein, but they know better. They know that that is for long-term storage. So they just stop brood production. So when this happens, there are a lot of challenging things that go with it. Now, I talked about how great it was to be able to, do splits and other things in the spring because of all these resources coming in. So going into a dearth, and all of it's all common sense, but it's one of those things where when it's new, it's really challenging to put it all together. So hopefully that's where I can kind of help guide you on this little journey. But let's say, for example, it's mid-June and you look in the hive and you're like, wow, there's not a lot of brood. At first, you might not think too much of it. Oh, there's still some brood. Okay, whatever. But then all of a sudden you look in there one day and there's no brood. And you're going to go, oh, crap, something happened to my queen. And I did this. I did this for I don't know, 3 or 4 years. And I remember thinking like I'm the worst beekeeper in the world because I somehow managed to kill my queen every spring. It's like you open up the hive and you look around and you're like, oh my gosh, I don't see, there's just no eggs, there's no nothing. The queen will want to keep laying eggs, and she might try to do so. And then the nurse bees are like, okay, thanks, queen. Yeah, why don't you go check out something on that other frame over there? I think they need you over there. And then they're going to cannibalize the eggs, right? They're not going to let those eggs be raised into new workers. So you have this thing where, like I've said, they're like, well, Jeff told us, man, if you don't see the queen, it's okay. Just look for eggs. And then you don't see eggs, and you're like, oh, boy, this is bad. So again, we talked about, there's been a marking queen discussion lately. Somebody's mentor told somebody like, oh, you shouldn't mark your queens. Now, I guess there is the possibility, I know this is me going on my ADHD thing, like sidetracked and everything, but while we're here, let's go ahead and do it. While there certainly is a risk that like you could completely botch the marking of the queen, it can happen, but it's just not that big of a risk. Just mark your queen. It's no big deal. If you don't want to do it, don't do it. 100% fine not marking your queen, but don't let somebody tell you that you shouldn't mark a queen. Well, if you shouldn't mark a queen, why is it that millions of queens get marked every year? Like if it's that bad, why, don't worry about it. But one thing I will say, and this is one of our brethren from the Discord room in Pennsylvania made a good point to share with everybody. Dab that marker a couple times on something else first, because sometimes you can get a little bit of an excessive flow when you first push down to try to get it started. But what I do want to say is once you mark her, don't just drop her right back into the hive. Put her into a queen cage, put her into something to give it about 10 minutes or so to dry. You do want to give that plenty of time to dry. But outside of that, the risk is really low. And when you're in a period of dearth and you have a good sized population of bees, it can still be challenging, to track her down. So having her marked certainly can't hurt anything. So if you open the hive up in June, July, and again, this is going to shift up and down depending on where you are. Folks who are up in the U.S., if you are, let's say, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Minnesota, Montana, maybe you folks are still probably cranking along on a great flow and everything's fine. But as you get into, later in the season and you have a period of dearth, if you do, then you're going to notice there's no brood production. They also might get a little bit crankier, right? Because they're getting into that zone where they know there's nothing coming in. They know they have good stuff that other bees and other, organisms, I shouldn't say, or other mammals and other animals and things are going to want to get to, right? So they're going to be a bit more defensive. So your sweet little kind bees that have been lovey-dovey all spring may not be as lovey-dovey in a dearth. Again, take it slow, take your time, a little bit of smoke, slow, deliberate movements, minimize vibrations. Don't be like me and just drop your hive tool and your smoker right on top of the hive as you're having a conversation with somebody. Put them on the adjacent hive that you're not inspecting if that's what you want to do, or set them in your cart or on the ground or somewhere and just minimize the vibration on the hive. So now we have a few options and things that we want to think about here. It's challenging for the new beekeeper to know, like, what do the bees need? What do I need to do next? Because we kind of instinctively think, well, they're the bees, they've got it all figured out. But if you started a new package or nuke this year, chances are pretty good they're still going to be a little bit behind. So the question becomes, how much stored honey or open nectar, how much of this is going to be enough? And this goes back to me, recommending talking to mentors or getting into, whether it's a Facebook group. I had one Facebook group experience. I went in the first day, saw some really bad advice. I bailed out. I haven't been back. But again, with all advice, take it with a grain of salt. Ask multiple people. Ask me. Ask 5 other people. Come to a consensus about what you think is the best approach for you. But if you have a mentor and somebody who can say, hey, in my area or our area, around 40 or 50 pounds is usually more than enough. Might be 80 pounds. It might only be 20 pounds. It just depends on the circumstances and the configuration and the equipment you're using. There are a lot of variables involved. But being able to ask somebody and say, hey, what do you think? Now, I'm going to tell you, a lot of people, you wouldn't believe how many people, I think it's probably like in the 90 percentile of people who say either, I had a mentor and they were terrible, I can't find a mentor, I don't want a mentor. Like, so many people are just like, I'm not doing it. And there are some that I think have really valid reasons for taking that position and that approach. If you've decided, like, I'm just going to go solo on this, I'm going to roll the dice, we'll see what happens, I'm fine with that. That's your thing. I completely understand, why you may want to take that approach. I would say just feed them. Feed them through this dearth to continue having them ramp up, to continue allowing them to store resources, because it's going to be really difficult if you have, let's say you had a package of bees, and I'm speaking to my area, so it's going to be a little different where you are, but if I start a package of bees, let's say in the month of May, and I put them into a 10 frame deep, and maybe they've drawn up, let's say they've drawn up all 10 frames, and everything has something in it. There's some honey, a little bit of open nectar, maybe a little bit of pollen, leftover brood, and that's it. That's probably not going to be enough to get them through the winter, because we still have to get through the summer dearth. They're going to use, realistically, I would say they would use somewhere in the ballpark of like a medium. Like, if I have a medium of honey, they will probably go through that just in the summertime alone. If the fall flow is really weak, they won't recover a whole lot of resources in the fall as they're ramping up the winter bees. So if you don't know what to do, I recommend go ahead and just go ahead and feed and keep feeding them pretty much through the summer. If you're going to feed, you're opening up the door to some challenges. And this is really, really, really important. So we're going to take a few minutes and we're going to talk about this, and we're going to focus on this because of just how critically important that it is. Entrances are a big deal. Now, there are times I've done all different types of things in beekeeping. I've left them wide open during the season. I've left them wide open over the winter. I've done a lot of different things. Some of them have worked really, really well. Some of them not so well. But the one thing that is consistent across this, if you have resources inside of your hive and anything in the community can smell it and wants to get to it, the bigger that entrance, the bigger your problems are going to be. And I promise you, so many people have said, well, we got to have a bigger entrance because there's a traffic jam at the entrance. So what? They're bees. They're professionals at getting in and out. They will figure it out. Just reduce that entrance. If you have a standard commercial entrance reducer, just bring it down to the smallest size, which is, like I said, it's usually about 3/4 of an inch to an inch, and just leave it like that. They can defend that really well. And if you have top entrances, close that stuff off. Close it up. Don't have the top and bottom entrances together. It's too much for them to defend, and they will absolutely just get robbed out. So the first thing I want you to focus on before you start feeding, get that entrance down to the smallest size. Now, as far as the feeders go, use whatever feeder you like. That's completely up to you. I use a lot of frame feeders. I do like my top feeders. When there is a dearth and there is a good population and they want to drink that syrup, they will just roll right through it. So the frame feeders, you're having to check on those like every couple of days. The top feeders I have a much greater capacity. The problem with that, though, is as long as they're taking it down, that's great. I mean, they'll go through that whole thing. And I can't remember the capacity of it, but it's massive. It's probably a couple of gallons. They will take that down in a week. But if they're not taking it down, you really got to pay attention, because, of course, in the summer heat, it will ferment. It will get really gross. It'll almost smell like wine. You walk up to the hive, you can smell it as you're walking up. You're like, oh, no, I shouldn't have left that sugar syrup in there. It's pretty gross. Where it gets really, really bad, though, is if you have the kind that has those floats in them. It looks like, I'll tell you, it's a queen excluder, basically. Queen excluder, plastic material, stapled to like some like balsa wood or some kind of a really lightweight wood. And I think they call it like a ladder style. And these floats will sit in the sugar syrup. And that's supposed to keep the bees from drowning. It does not keep the bees from drowning. So when you have a whole bunch of drowned bees in there, that creates like a surface that something could walk on, the hive beetles will go in there and they'll lay a bunch of eggs on those dead bee carcasses. And then, a few days later, you have these larval hive beetles emerging, and then that's a complete disaster. Now, if you get to that point, like I have never done, it's bad. Like, you way over, like, when you had your, I can't even say this, you had your feeder on for too long. Like, you've got to get a handle on that kind of stuff. Don't let that happen. I left it unattended. I literally filled it and then like went on travel for a week and then couldn't get to it. I think it was like 2 weeks. It was literally like 2 weeks I had this feeder on. And once it gets gross, they're not going to take up any more sugar syrup. So they probably drank it for the first 3 days. Then it got gross. And then here I check on it like 10 days later, and there's hive beetle larvae everywhere. And the hive ended up, collapsing. Basically, it was a disaster, 100% my fault. So keep a close eye on those feeders. If you have a remote hive that you're monitoring, you're just checking in on it once a week or whatever, give them less. Just do like a 1 gallon frame feeder or something like that. I do like feeders that minimize disruption to the hive. So if you're putting a feeder on, let's say you have a double deep and then you have maybe a medium honey super, and that medium is reserved for them to get through the winter, but you want to give them more feed. Don't put your feeder like down at the bottom or right above the deep. Put the feeder at the very top. Make them go up and get it. They can bring it back down. They'll be fine with that. The less interruption that has to take place, the less disruptive you need to be in tearing things apart to service the feeder, to add more feed, whatever needs to be done, the better off it is for everybody. In fact, a lot of times you can even just go up with just a veil or maybe even nothing at all, and you can just open the top, pour your syrup in, close it back up, and walk away. That's really going to depend on the temperament of the bees. But also, as a reminder, remember those really sweet, nice, happy bees that have been loving all the resources of the spring. Sometimes they may get a bit more temperamental as the season progresses and as you get into the dearth and then ultimately to the fall, time of year. So just be cognizant of that as you decide to be cool and go gloveless and veilless and whatever other gear you decide to take off. It's really, obviously it's great for dexterity when you can have your hands free and you can see better and all that kind of stuff. A couple of stings to the face will fix that though. Okay, another thing I want to bring up, and this is actually, I would say, the big benefit to a dearth, having a dearth, or basically what happens is you create a break in the brood cycle. Because if there's no resources coming in, the colony is not going to raise new brood. So how is that going to benefit you? You're like, Jeff, I don't understand. Why is that a good thing in any way, shape, or form? Well, because the varroa mite reproduces inside of brood. So if you have a break in the brood cycle and there are no capped brood anywhere in the hive, probably very little open brood even, they may continue to still raise a little bit, but not much. Unless you're feeding. If you are feeding them, again, you will still have brood. But if there's a natural dearth, your colony's got plenty of resources put aside, so you don't need to feed them, you have nowhere for varroa to reproduce. This is a great time to attack them. This is a great time to treat them, because at this time of year, most people have already pulled any honey off for themselves that they intend to harvest. So if you're using a treatment method that is, cannot be used with honey supers on, then you're in good shape because you've already pulled your honey off. And if you're using, like oxalic acid, well, typically if we're vaporizing oxalic acid, we're going to need to treat, probably once every 5 to 7 days over like a 3-week period roughly, to do 3 or 4 treatments to make sure we're getting all cycles of that, that current brood cycle. But you might be able to just do a single treatment with, when there's no brood being raised, when there's no open brood anywhere. So this is a really great time to knock down the varroa mite. Now, please don't do this though. Don't say, you know, I probably should treat in the spring. Like I'm talking about like this is like February, March, April time frame. I probably should treat, but you know what? We have a brood break. I'll just wait till then. You don't want to wait. Having a break in the brood cycle is really great, and it will be helpful, especially if you're able to knock them down and have them going into like July, August with 0 mites. Like that is huge. But the problem is the numbers of Varroa between like say February, March, and again, I'm speaking specific to my area, but it's not that different if you're on the same kind of parallel, you know, within the longitudinal, latitudinal kind of thing. I guess it'd be longitude. I always mess that up. Anyway, but if you make a decision that you're just not going to treat, that ramp up, the Varroa mite will have explosive growth in that like March to June timeframe. So as they produce and reproduce and create more and more, they are attaching to your honeybees. They are spreading disease to those workers. So you can go ahead and get your mite counts down to 0 and 1 by the 1st of July because you leveraged the dearth to treat your bees, which is great and awesome. But their viral loads could be through the roof. And I think that this is the real problem. Like this is the really big deal because so many people are like, oh, you don't need to treat. Treatment's not good. It's not, you should be looking for all natural solutions and things like that. And that's a whole separate, discussion to have. But if your bees don't have any resistance to the Varroa mite, they don't have any hygienic behavior that will allow them to, remove the mites or remove brood that's developing in the pupal phases and yank that brood out and throw it away because there's Varroa mites on it. If they don't have that and you just say, I'm not going to treat, this is something that affects you and your neighbors and everybody around you because these mites will spread from, colony to colony and they will spread from bee to bee. And it has an impact greater than just you. I saw a video, someone shared with me a video the other day of this guy who did this, 20-minute video on why he recommends never doing mite washes. Why would you do a mite wash? If you have a good IPM strategy in place, you're already treating the bees. So why are you just randomly killing 300 bees? So then you have, I don't know how many 100 comments or whatever in there saying, yeah, that's great. I hate the idea of killing these 300 bees. Look, I don't think anybody ever wakes up and says, I'm really looking forward to killing 300 bees today. The reality is that's like 1/6 of the total number of eggs that a queen will lay in one day. And yes, all of those bee lives are precious and they're all important. But honeybees are really, really amazing at one thing. Every one of them is willing to give their life and to sacrifice their life for the greater good of the colony. That is just what makes bees who and what they are. They know that if they go and they attack whatever that woolly, furry creature is that's coming up to their hive, they're going to die, but they are willing to do that. So sacrifice they make for the greater good of the colony. If you could ask these bees, which I know they obviously can't answer you, but if you could ask them, hey, are you willing to take one for the team here so we can do a mite assessment? They'd be like, yep, no problem. Let's do it. And they would jump in and make it happen. Here's the thing. The advice that this guy and that a lot of other people who were commenting was giving was, well, I just treat anyway. No matter what, we just treat every month and that's it. That's part of the problem. And the best way that I can explain this is, let's say that every October, and again, I'm talking about the U.S., so if you're in the Southern Hemisphere, every April, every American, every European, every Australian, wherever you're, every Canadian, all at that time of year, everybody just starts taking antibiotics because you might get strep throat. Well, I think when I say that, everybody would be like, whoa, antibiotic resistance. We don't want to develop antibiotic resistance. Why are we giving everybody antibiotics? Just because they might get, some kind of a illness that may require antibiotics. That is the exact same thing as treating bees that don't need treatment, right? So when this guy said, well, if you have an IPM strategy in place, you're already treating. No, you're not. What you're doing is you're monitoring. So what my goal would be, and I made a comment in the video, but what my goal would be is, let's say I've got 10 colonies and let's just say that it's 1 April. I'm pulling a mite count on every one of them. I'd like to see 0 to 1. So if I see 2, I'm not too terribly worried about it, but I'm definitely keeping an eye on it. So let's just say that I have 8 of the 10, I'm getting 0 to 2 mites per 100. One of them is at 13 and one of them is at 18. What I'm going to do is the 13 and the 18 are going to get treated right away. Now, if it is the spring, because I did find mites in all of the other ones, I'm probably going to go ahead and treat them anyway, right? This is 1 April. Nobody's had a treatment since the end of the, probably the end of the fall, maybe early winter. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to treat everybody. And that's my baseline 1 April treatment for this example. But definitely the ones that have the 13 and the 18, like they're going to get a treatment. So now we go to 1 May and everything across the board is 0 to 1, but I still have these 2 colonies, same 2, 15 and 17. Well, I'm going to treat them again, but now I'm paying attention here, right? This is kind of serious because we're getting to a point where I did a treatment and we are maintaining a baseline, but I'm not getting better. They're not getting better, and they're kind of unhealthy because remember that 15 number we use, it's 15 per 100. Well, I have 300 in my sample. That means there were 45 mites. Like that's a really high mite load. I've got to get more aggressive. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to treat with a more aggressive treatment on those that are in the teens, whereas my others that maybe they get up to 8 or 10, I might just say, you know what? Let's see if they have some resistance. Let's see if they're able to fight that off. Now, again, this is an experimental thing. You can do this if you want to try to breed for Varroa resistance. But let's say that you get through and you're keeping track April, May, June, July. And let's say you're sitting here in July, August timeframe, and you consistently have, let's say, 3 or 4 colonies that are 0 to 1 always. You gave them that one treatment, but there's still nothing. You go to May, they're at 0 to 1, you don't treat. You go to June, 0 to 1, you don't treat. You have some Varroa resistance, right? You have some of that VSH quality in those queens, in that colony. That's your breeder colony. So then you make queens from that. You go over to the colonies that are having the 15, 17, 18, 20, counts per 100, and you requeen them with the better genetics. Right? That's how you manage that. You don't manage it by just treating. Because remember, let's go to the example I just gave. You did your first treatment and they were at, I think, let's say the one colony was at 18, I think is the number we used. And then you checked them again a month later and the number was the same. Well, that high mite count is going to equate to a higher viral load. You need to be more aggressive. If you're not measuring the efficacy of your treatment, you don't know that. You don't know that your oxalic acid is not good enough. You need to get more aggressive, whether it's amitraz or it's, formic acid or whatever it might be. You're probably going to need to get more aggressive to really knock it down. But if you don't measure, you don't know. So if you just say, we're just going to generically treat, I love Apivar strips, and I'm just going to keep them on full time, year round, just keep the Apivar strips on there, except for when I have my honey supers on. Okay, I guess you can do that, but now how many iterations of Apivar are we on now? How many times have they had to redo the formula because of resistance that's built up, by the mite? So you got to think about this. It's not just you in this. It's not just you as the beekeeper. Your bees drift to other colonies sometimes. Your bees interact with other bees. This is something that affects everybody, and we really need to be looking at that from that holistic, kind of approach. So I think that should kind of cover it for the Varroa portion of the dearth. So we talked about the entrances as well, making sure that we're reducing the entrance size. You do want to keep an eye on things. You will know what is normal behavior for your colony. If you see signs of robbing. So when we talk about signs of robbing, I'm talking about a massive number of bees all around that entrance. And I mean, they are coming in, they're going out. They are wrestling all over the place and tumbling down onto the ground. There's quite often a pile of them fighting on the ground in front of the hive. All of those things are indicators that you have a robbing situation going on. A lot of times the colony can handle a little bit of robbing, right? You have that entrance tightened up nice and small. They can usually manage a little bit. Now, a couple things you can do is you can take some hardware cloth, put it over the entrance a little bit, and then force the bees to kind of go left and right a little. What I'm saying is you can kind of like adjust the way that the entrance is accessed so it makes it more difficult for the robbers who are returning to figure out how to get back in. So yes, your returning bees will have some trouble as well, but at least it slows things down. But if it really gets out of control, or even if you just don't know, you're like, I don't know what to do here, but this doesn't look good, just close the entrance. just completely close the entrance up, walk away for an hour or two. You can walk away for the rest of the day and just open it up again in the evening. Like maybe, let's say the sun goes down at 8:30 where you are, open it up again around 7:45, 8 o'clock. There's not going to be any robbing going on at night. But watch for the signs of robbing. When your bees come back, they're carrying pollen. You can usually see them bringing things back. Now, you can't see them bringing back, nectar and water and all of that, but you can see what regular foraging behavior looks like. And if you're not familiar, pay close attention now. Just go out there and just watch the bees for a couple hours, over the course of the next few weeks. Make sure that you know what normal behavior looks like so that you can recognize what abnormal behavior looks like. But again, if you see bees fighting and wrestling all over the front of the hive, you've got some robbing activity taking place. That is a very common thing to happen during a dearth. It's very common to have larger, stronger colonies targeting the smaller colonies. So if you still have small nukes or colonies that are just getting established and they are, maybe only 5, 6, 7 frames, and that's all you have, and if you're feeding them, they are going to be targets. So just make that entrance really small, and that should help significantly. Now, another thing you want to keep in mind is a lot of people like to they want to do some queen rearing, right? They love doing queen rearing in the spring, and they think, what? Finally got my colonies good and strong. I'm going to try and do some queen rearing. Be mindful that in the summertime, in the dearth periods, there may be a shortage of drones. It is more difficult to get these virgin queens mated as those spring drones are dying off. Now, just look in your own colonies as a good kind of measure. If you look in your colonies and you're seeing plenty of drones still, well, the chances are pretty good there's probably still a lot of them in your area. If you're looking in your colonies and you're only seeing a couple, well, the pool of available suitors may be significantly diminished within your area. So if you are thinking about trying to, keep feeding them to the point where they make queen cells and you want to keep splitting and keep doing things, it's a very aggressive behavior. Depending on where you are and the status of your flow and everything, you can definitely do it. Just be mindful of the fact that you may have some challenges with, with drone availability. Another thing I want to talk to you about, like we covered the thing about hive beetles and how they like to get into the feeders and things like that, but this is typically the time of year in the summer where the hive beetles start to get stronger. They start to really reproduce quickly. They will go to the corners of your hives and they'll find little places where they can hide away from the bees. Now, you have a good, strong colony, they will get them cornered. Like they will force them into a little corner, and they will propolis that whole area around them and literally put them into a propolis prison. And then they die inside that little prison. But they look for little dark corners and places that the bees can't get to them in. So if you go to shbtrap.com, I'm not an affiliate. I don't get paid anything from them, but they have these little traps that put a feed in there that's got like boric acid, I think it is, and it looks like a pollen patty. And you can put those little traps in. Those are very effective. The boric acid is doing a pretty good job of killing the hive beetles. If you are using pollen patties are one of the favorite foods of hive beetles. They will eat them. They will lay eggs on them. They will do everything. It's just, you got to be really careful. So if you're using pollen patties, don't throw a big, massive, what are they, about 4x6, pollen patty on and just slap it in the middle of the hive. Cut it into quarters maybe. So let's say you cut it into quarters and then make maybe 2 strips per colony and put it onto 4 colonies. That way it gives them time to eat it before the hive beetles can get in there and lay their eggs on them. I've said many times before, I'm not a huge pollen patty guy. I've had, mixed effectiveness with them. I just don't need them. But if you like to use them and you want to use them, absolutely have at it. Just be mindful that hive beetles love them. So if you want to use Swiffer pads, or I think there's the Dixie, what is it called? Dixie brand shop towel. There's different kinds of things that people use to trap, the hive beetles. It hooks into their little legs. So you can do that. The oil traps, shbtrap.com, any of those things are all, pretty good. There's one guy, I think he's the bug farmer, I want to say, from YouTube. I saw this video. It's so funny. This guy's a piece of work, but he created this little $17 or $18 vacuum, the handheld vacuum that you buy from Amazon. And he just did a little bit of fabrication with it to change the point on it where the suction comes in. And he just goes around and just sucks up all these beetles with this little trap or with this little vacuum. It's really funny to watch the guy. He's a piece of work. Anyway, whatever, system works for you, by all means, go after that. So I think we're going to kind of wrap things up here, but a couple of key takeaways I want you to just be mindful of during this period of dearth that may happen depending on where you are. You're going to see a reduction in brood production. You may see no evidence of your queen. You may think the queen is gone. Do a more detailed inspection. Really dig deep. She's probably still there. If you have any doubts on that, give them some feed and see how they react to it, right? Give them some sugar syrup and see what they do. See if they start trying to raise more brood. But it's perfectly normal. You will see increased robbing activity. You will see increased, hive beetles just because of the time of year. They've had time to reproduce and they've had time to find your hive. Like if you have a brand new hive in a new area, well, they finally just found you. And you're not going to find them everywhere, by the way. This is not really a huge problem, typically the further north that you go. So I think that, and I could be wrong here, but I believe my Canadian brothers and sisters up there, I don't think it's an issue up in Canada. I think that it's just too cold for them to overwinter in the soil. Oh, that's another thing too, though. If you're dealing with hive beetles, you can use Grub-X or some other comparable type of thing to sprinkle down on the ground, and that will kill the grubs in their pupal stages. Also, chickens, I hear, are pretty good too. If you have chickens, don't use the Grub-X, but let the chickens run around the hive, and they can scrape out those pupating hive beetles as well. And then again, feed if you need to feed. If you need to keep building them up, there's nothing wrong with ramping them up. Keep those entrances small to reduce robbing. And I feel like that's probably kind of enough for now on the dearth subject. So remember, check us out, beekeepingfornewbies.com. It's NEWBEES.com, bestbeekeepinggear.com, youtube.com/@beekeepingfornewbies. And I think that's pretty much going to do it for today. So take care, be kind to one another. Remember that I love you. There's nothing you can do about it. We'll talk to you soon.